doomsday, Armageddon, the rapture, the apocalypse, the end times, whatever you want to call it. The end of the world usually looks like fire raining from the sky, mass population extinction, a lone protagonist in a desert with a backpack and a haunted past. We all love a good story about the end of the world, and humans throughout history are no different. So let's all laugh at the ones who got it wrong.
I'm going to rate each prediction based on 4 things: how believable it was to the people at the time, the rationality of the prediction, the impact, and the entertainment value. And some of you might be thinking, why? I could just do a regular old tier rating and frustrate everyone in the comments with my subjective baseless takes. But where's the fun in that? And if for some reason you want to play along at home, I'll put the scorecard down below so we can nerd it out in the comments later.
In 1000 AD, a bunch of Christian clerics, including Pope Sylvester II, predicted that Jesus would return 1,000 years after his birth for the final judgment day. And if you haven't finished reading the Bible yet, Jesus coming back is meant to signify the end times, when the righteous few go up to heaven and the rest of us sinners fall into a big burning hole or something like that. Chroniclers like Rodolphus Glaber described people repenting en masse, giving up their worldly possessions, building churches, and of course, trekking to Jerusalem for the big party. Then, just as with all failed apocalypse predictions, everyone woke up the next day and in realizing that the world didn't end, just got ready for work, I guess. Probably tried to get their family heirlooms back from Linda. Or if you were one of the predictors who just couldn't let it go, maybe we got the calculations wrong and it was actually 1,000 years after his death, not his birth. So Armageddon is actually going to come in 1033? Duh, of course. Oop, no, that didn't work out either.
Our first prediction gets a solid 3 out of 5 convincing Netflix documentaries, because I think it's wholly believable that people at the time would have feared the coming of the end due to widespread illiteracy and the dominance of the church. Or maybe they were just concerned about the millennium ticking over at a time when there was a lot of social and political unrest. I'm going for 2 out of 5 peer reviews for rationality, because I think the prediction was based more on religious symbolism rather than science. And their biblical interpretation was pretty basic, to be honest.
Like really, 1,000 years after Jesus? Why is that? Because the number sounds nice?
I wonder if this will become a trend. It's hard to judge the true impact of this prediction because many historians believe the reports of people freaking out were exaggerated. There was a decent amount of Europe that was under Christian influence at the time, but it's hard to know if the prediction was formalized and widely distributed. Also, when the prediction failed, there was no major social collapse or exodus from the church. So it gets a modest 3 out of 5 Joe Rogans from me. And lastly, this one gets 2.5 out of 5 pet rocks for entertainment. Because yeah, medieval apocalypses had all that fire and brimstone, but I still wouldn't pay to see it in theaters.
You just know that shit's going straight to DVD. Does anyone even watch DVDs anymore? What's your DVD equivalent? Prime.
Bringing the first big millennial panic to a total of 10.5 out of 20, or a tier rating of D.
Yay. In 1524, a group of astrologers, not astronomers, in London, including Johannes Stoffler, predicted that the moon, stars, and planets would align under the water sign of Pisces. Upon hearing that, Italian astrologer Luca Greco predicted that wild storms and a great flood would cause mass destruction in Europe. Thanks to the recent developments of the printing press, people all over Europe freaked out. 20,000 people in London fled to higher ground. The mayor of Toulouse built an ark. It was wild. When the rain didn't come, everyone shriveled in collective embarrassment, except for the astrologers who had to come up with something quick before they were tossed into the river. Guys, I've revised the numbers and we're actually off by exactly 100 years. Wow, that is a pleasing whole number. Yeah, we weren't wrong at all. The actual flood is just 100 years from now when none of us will be alive to experience it. That makes so much sense.
I put on this coat because it's winter and heating's really expensive. At the time of this prediction, astrology was considered a serious science, with planetary alignments widely believed to influence earthly events, which makes the rationality somewhat in line with what people believed at the time. But critically, there wasn't any wild weather or weird natural events happening. So even by the standards of the day, the methodology could not be empirically supported.
In terms of the panic caused, people ran away. They built boats. They invested in flood protection.
The biggest impact was in London, with dozens of pamphlets circulated with warnings. But the prediction also spread throughout Europe.
There's even a story about a German count named von Iggeheim, that is not how you pronounce that,
who built a 3-story ark for his close friends and family. But when the rain started, a crowd of people rushed to the ship demanding to be let on. As you'd expect, he refused, but then he was dragged off the ship and stoned to death by the crowd. Yikes. Afterwards, astrology lost some credibility, especially when they tried to change the date after the fact. And in terms of entertainment, let's be real. This story would make a hilarious Monty Python skit. We've got rich people building arks, astrologers and fortune tellers cashing in, and people all over Europe preparing for this celestial flood, only to have a year that was drier than usual.
It writes itself.
Bringing the total score to 15 out of 20, or a tier rating of C.
Let's fast forward to 1806 in the town of Leeds in England, where a prophetic chicken began laying eggs with "Christ is coming" written on them. People lined up around the block to see the divine doom shells until it was revealed that the farmer, Mary Bateman, was riding on the eggs and then shoving them back inside the chicken. Yes, this really happened.
This one gets a solid 3 out of 5 convincing Netflix documentaries from me, because people in the local community were quick to believe the hoax, and they paid money to see it. It probably goes without saying, but yeah, this prediction was not rational, not accurate, and biologically impossible. The impact was pretty localized in Leeds in England. Local residents reportedly gathered in crowds, prayed, and showed signs of religious fear and repentance. But the Jesus chicken eggs didn't lead to any widespread mass hysteria. And lastly, for entertainment, this story is amazing. I would love to see the creators of Wallace and Gromit turn this into a short story. But the best part is what happened afterwards.
Because while the fallout mainly consisted of Mary Bateman being ridiculed by the town, there was a decent amount of media coverage, and the story kind of became a cautionary tale about gullibility and religious panic.
And then Mary Bateman went on to live a really colourful life, eventually being hanged in 1809 for poisoning a woman while pretending to cure her with magical remedies. So it gets a 5 out of 5 pet rocks from me,
because Mary Bateman went on to be quite the character.
Coming to a final score of 11 out of 20, or a tier rating of D.
In the early 1840s, William Miller, a former farmer turned preacher, predicted that Christ would return in 1843.
Christ will return in 1843.
But later revised it to October 22nd, 1844.
Actually, I meant October 1844.
Tens of thousands sold their belongings, abandoned their farms, and followed him around in white ascension robes. When nothing happened, the event was dubbed The Great Disappointment. Oh, what a name. But it didn't seem to matter in the long run, because his movement of Millerism went on to establish a little group known as the Seventh-day Adventist Church, boasting over 25 million members worldwide today.
I'm giving The Great Disappointment a whopping 5 out of 5 convincing Netflix documentaries, because Miller was methodical and persuasive, and many of his followers believed his prediction to be scholarly. Miller's prediction was based on complex biblical interpretation and date math. He wholeheartedly believed his prediction, but it was still fundamentally flawed and obviously incorrect. It didn't cause public chaos, but within his following, people were absolutely convinced and terrified. Miller estimated estimated that 50 to 100,000 people believed his prophecy. It spread across churches and publications throughout New England and beyond, and this could be considered massive reach for the time, with national press coverage and long-term religious influence. And lastly, this story is obviously less absurd than a prophetic chicken, but Miller's prediction was dramatic, and it really hit hard with his followers.
The aftermath of the Great Disappointment was huge. People wept openly. Miller faced criticism and even violence from his followers. People were burning down his churches. Some left the religion entirely, and others clung to revised beliefs. Eventually, it gave birth to the Seventh-day Adventist Church and other new movements. But the fallout was emotionally devastating and religiously transformative, one that is still studied today.
It's also inspired everything from scholarly books to satire. So The Great Disappointment gets a total score of 17 out of 20, or a tier rating of A.
In 1910, Halley's Comet was due to make one of its regular 76-year returns, and for the first time in history, humans could study it with the use of modern scientific instruments. Unfortunately, the scientists of the day didn't have any media training.
What does that mean, I need media training?
Astronomer Camille Flammarion wrote all sorts of speculative nonsense in a New York Herald article, imagining carbonic acid in the tail searing our lungs, or reactions that could trigger a diminution of nitrogen and excess oxygen that would extinguish the human race. Another French astronomer speculated, also with no supporting evidence, that the tail might somehow produce a barrage of X-rays and cause all the water vapor in the atmosphere to condense at once, triggering the biggest flood the world has seen since Noah. Oh yeah, the big Noah flood. Sure. Let's just reiterate. There was no evidence that these things could happen. These scientists were just talking some shit for the newspapers. Then on February 7th, serious scientists doing something called spectral analysis found that the comet's tail contained cyanogen gas, a deadly poison.
Astronomers tried to explain that the gas was incredibly diffuse and posed zero actual threat, but newspapers saw an opportunity for money.
Cue the panic. People bought anti-comet pills, gas masks, and comet insurance. Hucksters sold bottles of comet-proof air. In some cities, churches filled up with families waiting for the end. There were some people who even lowered themselves into wells or hid in caves. When the Earth passed through the comet's tail, of course, nothing happened.
And look, I'll give it to the people of the day. Science was still new. People didn't know how comets worked, and actual astronomers did discover cyanogen gas, which is a deadly poison. There were a few key figures who really did not understand the importance of ethical science communication. So while the accuracy of the comet science was sound, the doomsday prediction was based on astronomers like Flammarion saying the quiet part out loud, with seemingly no awareness of the panic that it could cause. The media also added fuel to the fire and wouldn't listen to the facts. In terms of impact, there was widespread anxiety, people praying to be saved, and snake oil salesmen profiting all over Europe and the US. Thanks to newspapers and telegraphs, panic spread across continents. It's one of the first global science-based apocalyptic scares. Thankfully, there was no long-term damage from this prediction. Most people just moved on. Some scientists mocked the panic, and others used it to push science education. And look, I don't care what you think. I'm giving this one a 5 out of 5 pet rocks for entertainment, because I just love the idea of people selling air. Like, this was just last century. What? People in Japan are doing that? Capitalism's gone too far.
When the comet returned in 1986, Leland Jensen predicted it would be pulled into the Earth's orbit, causing widespread destruction.
Spoiler alert, it wasn't. And that leaves the Halley's Comet panic with a total score of 15 out of 20, or a tier rating of B. The 1990s, a glorious time of mainstream rock music, indestructible phones, and dot-com bubble bros.
I was still just a kid, but I distinctly remember my neighbour coming over to tell my mum to fill our bathtub with water. It was the 31st of December, 1999, the year that we entered a new millennium, the year that all the computers were supposed to malfunction, the year that the world was going to end. And sadly, it did. Just kidding, everything was fine, at least for another year. The planes kept flying, the power remained on, and the nuclear missiles stayed safely snuggled in their underground bunkers. Y2K. No, it's not Elon Musk's 47th child. Y2K stands for year 2000, and it refers to a bug in the way older computer systems stored dates. See, to save memory, many programmers had coded years as 2 digits instead of 4. So for instance, 1984 was just 84, and 1999 was 99. The fear was that when the year 2000 rolled around, computers would read 00 and think it was 1900, not 2000. And as a result, every computer in the entire world would explode at the exact same time. Gotcha. The fear was that all the technology that we rely upon every day would just suddenly stop working. In a response to this existential threat, people stockpiled food, pulled money out of their bank accounts, and bought generators like it was Black Friday at Apocalypse Mall. But at the end, nothing really happened. Not because we all overreacted, but because a ton of engineers worked their asses off to save the world. Governments and companies spent over $300 billion globally, updating code, testing systems, and patching vulnerabilities. Some computers had minor issues, but the world didn't end. We had successfully avoided the apocalypse. Go team! Amidst the optimism for the internet and a bright tech-filled future, Y2K reminded us just how fragile all of this is.
So this was a real problem with older code systems. The warnings were grounded in technical logic, and experts were genuinely worried. This prediction was entirely believable, especially if you worked in government or tech. The prediction didn't come true, but it might have, if not for the intense preparation. Some argue that the panic actually prevented the problem. So the prediction was not irrational, just successfully avoided. I'm giving Y2K 5 out of 5 Joe Rogans for impact. That's a weird sentence. This prediction was truly global. It wasn't a full-on panic in the streets, but there was widespread anxiety, preparation, and global awareness. We're talking banks, militaries, air traffic control systems, governments, all making serious moves. Post Y2K, critics claimed that it was all overblown, but others pointed out the massive efforts that went on behind the scenes that really saved everyone. It was billions of dollars spent, corporate audits, even new legislation. It was a pretty big deal. And maybe I'm biased because it happened when I was a kid, but the sheer scale of this millennium tech crisis is absolutely going to get plenty of movie iterations in the future.
Just think of all the nostalgia. The computers, the brick phones, the nostalgia.
And it's for those reasons that the Y2K prediction gets the highest score that we've seen so far, with a total score of 19 out of 20, or the almighty S tier.
Following increased terrorism attacks and the 2008 financial crisis, the years leading up to 2012 saw the spread of an apocalyptic theory known as the 2012 Mayan calendar apocalypse.
And more than 100 San Diegans are preparing for the end of the world.
People thought that because the Mayan calendar ended on December 21st, 2012, that this was the Mayans predicting the end of the world. To some, that meant total destruction, solar flares, planetary alignment disasters, rogue planets like Nibiru, black holes, you name it. But here's the thing, Mayan scholars never actually said the world would end. The calendar wasn't stopping, it was just resetting. Because the Mayans used a long count calendar, a sophisticated system that tracked time in massive cycles. September 21st, 2012, that wasn't doomsday, that was just the end of the Baktan, a 144,000-day cycle. To the Mayans, time wasn't linear like ours, it was cyclical, like seasons, or vinyl records. One track ends and then the next one starts.
So when the calendar hit 2012, it was less bye everybody, and more like, you've hit the 13th season of Earth. Would you like to play the next season? 3, 2, too bad, it's already started.
The whole Mayan doomsday thing, that was just us, modern people with modern fears, projecting our linear apocalyptic thinking onto a culture that never saw time that way. Did knowing any of this stop the panic? Of course not. The theory spread like wildfire online, in documentaries, and even in classrooms. Some people prepped bunkers, others meditated en masse for planetary rebirth, and of course, Hollywood jumped on the bandwagon with the Roland Emmerich disaster film 2012, which featured the literal Earth cracking apart like a dropped cookie. Then December 21st came and went, and we were all still here arguing on the internet.
In terms of believability, this prediction was not very credible among experts, but enough armchair research made it feel plausible to the general public. But the prediction was based on a total misunderstanding of Mayan timekeeping, so nothing about it held up academically. Okay, it was completely irrational really, but nicely wrapped in ancient aesthetics.
Like it sounded cool, I guess.
In terms of impact, there were isolated panics. Some people built shelters, stocked food, or even abandoned their homes. But most people just reacted with memes and jokes.
Earthquakes, tidal waves, floods, monsoons, alien attacks. The world is in the people, and that means one thing and one thing only. I can save you money. It's our 2012.
I'd say it was more curiosity rather than mass panic. Afterwards, most of us just moved on. So there wasn't much fallout. Although I'm sure a lot of crystal shops made a profit that year. Obviously, this one was super entertaining while it was happening. And in a weird way, I was kind of rooting for it. Bringing our last apocalypse prediction to a total score of 12 out of 20, or a tier rating of C. And here's the final tier ratings. If you've been playing along at home, go ahead and share your ratings in the comments. But we're not done yet, because as you might have realized, nobody got an F tier. So I guess I'll just throw in some of, in my opinion, the worst end times predictions. Like the 2003 Nibiru cataclysm, first put forward in 1995 by Nancy Leader. According to Nancy, aliens in the Zeta Reticuli star system told her through messages via a brain implant of a planet which would enter our solar system and cause a pole shift on Earth that would destroy most of humanity. The theory of Nibiru, also sometimes called Planet X, Planet 9, these are in fact different things, or the Pluto connection, gained so much traction that NASA had to issue an official statement saying this planet has not been observed and its existence is at most theoretical. Nonetheless, related apocalyptic predictions have continued to surface in recent decades, like those from David Meade, a conspiracy theorist and self-proclaimed Christian numerologist. Meade has made several end-of-world predictions, including the belief that on October 5th, 2017, North Korea, China, and Russia would all launch a combined nuclear attack on the US. Then the Earth would be devastated by a series of magnitude 9.8 earthquakes. The Earth's magnetic pole would shift by a whopping 30 degrees. The US would be split in half. Barack Obama would be elected for an unconstitutional third term. And finally, the Great Tribulation would begin promptly on October 15th. When all of this didn't happen, Meade changed his prediction to the following year, in the spring of 2018. And when I was trying to find a photo of David Meade to put in this video for you guys, I realized that this is likely not his real name, it's just his pen name, which is unfortunate for this guy whose real name is actually David Meade, and who's now being trolled online and receiving death threats, which is just not cool. Especially because this guy has nothing to do with the end of world predictions. But also just don't send death threats to anybody. I'm also going to give an F to televangelist Jesse Duplantis for saying that Jesus hasn't returned yet because people haven't been giving enough money to his church.
I honestly believe this, that the reason why Jesus hadn't come is because people are not giving the way God told them to give.
Come on. Also, F just seems to be anything I don't like now. And I can't finish this video without mentioning these apocalyptic cults. These guys get an F-, not because they fit the criteria necessarily, but because they succeeded in actually ending the lives of their followers, while the rest of us watched in horror and the real world kept going. Apocalyptic cults like Heaven's Gate, the People's Temple, Branch Davidians, Order of the Solar Temple, Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God, and Om Shamriko. While it's entertaining for us to poke fun at the dumb ideas from the past, some of these dumb ideas resulted in people taking actions that literally did end their world. Apocalypse prediction stories are a good reminder to be aware of the people out there preaching their doomsday nonsense, often targeting vulnerable and scared people who will happily give away all of their money and possessions for a chance at salvation. Of course, we all know that humanity does face real existential threats: climate change, pandemics, AI, nuclear war, and asteroids, but they're not delivered by angry gods or preachers selling prepper kits. It's more like spreadsheets and nerds working overtime. The real people working on these issues aren't promising the end of the world, they're trying to prevent it. And maybe these guys aren't as exciting as a cult with matching sneakers or some fancy old book, but it's real. And I think it's worth paying attention to.
Okay, and that's all I've got for you today. Let me know if you like this format for a video. It's a little different than what I normally do, but it might be nice every once in a while, right? Sacrifice your likes, comments, and subs to our algorithmic overlords. A huge thank you to my wee band of paid Patreons for making this video possible. And if you want to continue the conversation in the comments with me, then my question for you today is, if you knew that the world was going to end in 6 months, what would you do? Or let me know if I've missed anything, like some of your favorite apocalypse prediction stories. Bye!